altitude villages, presumably. 20th April, the dot, COVID or not, the water to the village fountain will be turned back on. French rural life has its routines, with few exceptions, or deviations. While I could just continue to wait, I can never be that sure. I have only the word of the locals and don't have the lifetime of reference. I have to gather every 25-litre receptacle I can and gather water from the river at risk. Really rather some risk. It's a fair torrent. The icy cold meltwater from the glaciers that once we went skied on, rather than wait for some religious day mid to late. The cave, écuries, stables are my favourite quarter, even more so than the grenier, loft space enclosed with the pitch timbers and trusses. April, that when that's over, something may or may not happen for fountain water, for my much anticipated breathable lime concrete floor slab. Will COVID delay the occasion? Will the whole prefecture protecting persons prevent crop irrigation? Because it's both urban and rural prefecture. Is Chambry? But no, I needn't have worried. I needn't have contaminated all my 25-litre cans with algae. Even in those glaciers, in those pristine meltwaters, there's algae that multiplies, it warms up. But my French prefecture of Chambry sees through the hypocrisy of COVID and applies the age-old regime of the pay, the countryside. The countryside routines are paramount. Might have something to do with the political power of the farmer, you don't know. All my forward planning of lime mortar of the right grade, show, and gravel of the right shade. I wanted a beige floor slab to be on show. My lime floor on show. Show on show. A small thing like the basics of hydration wasn't going to keep me back. Off down by the riverside, which can be a fruity place, according to popular cultural references, I met, or rather, down by the riverside, I got curious looks from a new riverside enclave of locals. Now, there is a story to expand upon about how the animals of the Alps interact with each other. The wolf and the vulture have been encapsulated in celluloid already, but there's less venerable fauna that feel the need to be represented, they told me, in good old animal magic, Johnny Morris fashion. But it does seem comical now to refer back, almost unbelievable. Everyone had been on a month or more of holiday, with very little but the four walls to look at, starved of social interaction. A bit like a proxy Stockholm syndrome, people would be more forthcoming than usual. Only a short distance away, there was the jogger that used to come by, that I'm sure wouldn't have given me the time of day or a second glance, but coming by each day to stretch her legs. She would only generate enthusiasm in me. It was an extrinsic thing, not intrinsic in me. She was projecting that I should have enthusiasm. She seemed quite normal and not particularly needy. But her hinterland for her jog probably stretched about as far as it was necessary for me to go down to the riverside, the bank. Opposite my nearest bit of riverbank is the nut-grinding water wheel. Very little grows at high altitudes, and people in olden days would have brought their nut harvest from their tree down to have ground into flour and exotic oils. They'd have known very well what to do with these essential oils, and the value of the holders of that knowledge made them quite able to escape charges of witchcraft. Apart from the large rounded boulders that get washed down with the meltwaters, torrid flows, it calms to a very gentle, but up to 50 metres wide, babble almost, you might think, but there's a strength to that little babbling wide stream of water that you wouldn't believe. I've chosen a spot that you can scramble down to because there's about, I don't know, perhaps up to 10 metres, scrambling on all fours up a 5 metre vertical bank, I would say. The difference between the summer and the winter meltwaters. Whole trees get swept down river. The oldest bridges would have been swept away seasonally and rebuilt. Just trees and boards. But for 100, since Napoleon's time, there's been a stone bridge that you just drive cars over. Not in the middle of nowhere, but the huge timber gearings that you might be familiar with if you've ever been inside a windmill. Even more so for a water wheel. There's more force, much more force. They used metal wisely for the pieces that wear. But opposite that, on my side of the bank, I'm in new territory for me. It's a bit of a cul-de-sac. They don't use that word in French, but that I've never really needed to go up. And there's a whole little community out in their road that I not have to only explain my whereabouts, where I've come from, because I'm driving, because these gallons and gallons of water are heavy. But I also have this new community to watch me as entertainment as I venture into the cold meltwaters, roll up my trousers like a city dweller and collect this water like I'm a really rubbish fisherman or something. And then there's the dozen or so journeys up the scramble up the 45-degree narrow animal track down to the river. Possibly the dairy cows could manage it when they're grazing verge side, straddling as wide as I stably could. I would stretch one arm out and hand over the 25-litre drum to the other hand and place it as stably as I could further up the bank, taking the greatest care not to let any water make it any muddier than it already was. The drum would then act as a bit of an anchor if you hug it at its base and then shimmy your feet up little by little. But I slowly got my water. And for a small rural community of mixed age groups, I was the low-budget alternative to Gladiator's game show on the television. Now, as a glorious gladiator, you get the girl. Or rather, I left it at the vaguest possibility of getting the girl that showed a reasonable amount of interest. She'd come home to a dance place in the city because, well, everyone's seen those zombie apocalypse or other such disaster, and the story always goes that you survive longer out in the country, so she'd had nobody but her dad for company for weeks. My discretion, of course, and the fact that it was all unspoken promise of fantasy in the eye, read and understood and discreetly confirmed, that gave fantasy and story life. Melusine is the nymph of this white water, fresh water. The Dauphine, the dolphin, is the human of the sea, equivalent, but secondary to man. While this is an introduction to a wine review, Melusine is sort of a freshwater mermaid. The Dauphine, Lyon, was, in the times of the Roi, the king, France's second city, Marseille not being part of France then. The Dauphine was the pretender to the throne, the second. But no real substance, so I will say no more. And get back to my breathable lime floor construction. There were some local construction professionals in my road that were doing some works for the nice neighbour. I stumbled along with my French and their patience, and became aware that it was de rigueur for the professionals, who were the only people allowed to go to the Brico, the builders merchants, at the time of COVID. So they were collecting stuff for people that put in their orders and taking a 10%. The government, in the attestations, paperwork that everyone had to promise and declare if they were going anywhere, even the supermarket, clearly stated that only professionals. Every builder was putting on a bit of commission for any acquaintance extra over order, but they didn't just say, "It is not possible." So many people would just say, French love to say, "It is not possible." So that was progress and acceptance by the locals. Then it opened up a little bit. Only account holders, which you could set up online if you've got data, and the Bricos were doing delivery only. Then things opened up a little bit further and you could book a collection slot. Progress, you could work with this. But I don't have online, I don't have data. I have to go further into town and sit outside a closed library or tourist information and use their Wi-Fi. Which does raise an eyebrow, and a local does ask local municipal plod just to look at you and find out what you're doing there, what you're planting. Then you do get moved on. So I get back with my gallons and gallons of water, river water, and a neighbour has gone out in his car that he's not supposed to and blocked me in again, as he does in his petty power play. To unload my water, I have to lift it above my head so that I can squeeze by and not damage his car by scraping along the side. But all this means that my Brico collection slot passes. I've already had a paintbrush break and had to wire the bristles through the bristles and back around the handle to keep the bristles on. No, I never learnt how to repair a paintbrush in college anywhere. Certainly not the Royal Danish Architectural Academy. I just wanted some more blonde aggregate just to make sure once I'd started a job I had enough so I could finish it. But the collection slot had passed. But I'd made unexpected new friends, or allies, I'm choosing to call them at this point. I had a difficult task and it was made harder. Self-deprecating politeness, pacifism, keeping good counsel, biding my time, tit for tat avoided. Sure, I could have indulged in petty power plays, but not my thing. It just mean they won, they got a rise out of you. That they can just slag you off with ad infinitum to anyone that will listen. I kept my own company at the dinner table. Reading at the dinner table, not usually the done thing, but lime bag mix weight proportions instructions. Mother needed to be more specific to aid digestion or manners with company. Why was reading at the dinner table not the thing to do? She didn't say specifically, "Don't read lime bag mix weight proportion instructions" at the dining table. Only rats remark on my rudeness. They're all that's there. I am alone for COVID. There are no 6-person support group for our likely last days before we're back to the earth. Fuller's earth beads are like cat litter. They're a breathable insulation. They're bulky and very lightweight in what seem heavy-duty decompostable bags, imported from Travis Perkins in the United Kingdom, but in the back of my van, across the channel and 1,000 kilometres down. A bargain. They wanted to get rid of them. No one's got any use for them. I have seen them in Leroy Merlin in Annecy, I think, but that's a million miles away from this place in time. The instructions say lay in bags, but that leaves big voids. Escaping beads will want to fill these voids and find a lower level, and the lime aggregate mix floor isn't likely to sink at a uniform rate with the Fuller's earth bead reassembling itself, and the slab's likely to crack. The spanning floor slab surely is likely to crack. So some are laid in whole bags, and then some bags I split and spread evenly between the cracks between the bags. Common sense, but these little beads want to slip down under and away, so it uses up a lot of the finite material. My mixing tray for my lime concrete and mortar is an enamelled steel hot water cylinder surround. I peeled it off the cylinder and cut the edges and folded them up and clipped them. The cylinder from a local tip, with a very attractive blonde recycling operative. So I infilled the voids with these loose, full as earth beads. But the cave vaulting topside was very uneven in level, and I wanted to do a downstand around the edge anyway. I was a little unsure about the quantities, but to be on the safe side, and it proved a little bit necessary, I ended up chipping the polyisocyanate insulation off the hot water cylinder that I'd reclaimed from the local tip, as well as, and that insulation in its chippinged form, about each piece about sort of size of your fist, I squirreled between the corners of 4 bags where most of the beads wanted to bleed off to, under and away. The image that looks a little bit like an alien abduction behind a Grange barn door is actually showing you both the lay of the ancient stone vaulting of the cave, the cellar, and the little stacks that I made around the place to show the levels that I needed to work to. Now you don't, but I knew already that lovely door that opens to the lovely view down valley and off beyond the ancient old celery tree, cerisier, ancient, 20 or 30 metres tall. I know, they're not supposed to grow that high. I had to make a door swing arc, and so I wasn't creating a trip. I then did a 45-degree rake from that level up to more or less the greater level of most of it. And then so you've got the big picture there, vaulting in the centre of the 55 metres squared of floor. The old stones were higher, so I decided to keep the level the same so it wasn't excessive, but reduce the thickness of the slab. But I had to do more than that. I had to have more of a compromise. I had to have a slightest slope to the whole slab, up to the highest point, so that I could have just 10 millimetres of floor slab above the highest point of the mid-arch of the ancient existing building from well before Napoleon's time, probably medieval, this vault was built. I'll justify my compromise to you because from the Springer points of the vaults, it's 1.5 metres to finished floor level now, as it is, without adding another X amount to get it anally level. It seems a bit like an authentic rustic floor slab. I think you'd be okay with it. The most important thing was polishing it, wetting it and getting the fat up and polishing it to get that beige mirror-like finish. I have always been concerned that the lime won't be hard enough to withstand the wear and tear, but the little 45-degree 2-inch 50mm step on the door swing, the alien abduction door swing, gave me the opportunity to experiment a little with just pure lime surface covering. It's warm, sun beating down that area with the door open so I could see what was going on. Dried out quick. However much it dried out, I could wet it more and add just pure lime dust to it and work up some fat from the concrete. Again, like it was fresh. You do have to wet it a lot and leave it a lot and wet it some more, but it works enough to get sharp edges on that curve of the door swing. And pure lime, heavily wetted top surface will resist any foot traffic. Hay and husk and topsoil had been blown in through the window openings for a century and had collected on the top of the vaulting. I collected the largest black bin bags full of this nutrient-rich stuff. Swept it all up fastidiously because I was concerned something in the darkness would start rooting and a tree would grow up through my precious lime floor. The amount of watering I was giving it. So clean had I swept the top side of the ridges of the cellar cave arches, and enough cat litter got laid that day, enough for a tiger. Tigre, as they say in French. Tiger's a big cat, so it'll need a lot of cat litter. You understand? It shouldn't need it, the floor, not the tiger. A Tyvek breathable membrane with heat-reflected coating over the top of the lot, over the top of all the cat litter, the Fuller's Earth, separating the slab of 200 millimetres, the slab of 200 millimetres down to 10 millimetres of thickness. Reads this specification after the fact. Confessional. So I'm mixing tray after tray and sprinkling chopped up fiberglass shards, strands, to abate any cracking. Reinforcement recognised these chopped up fiberglass shard strands. So you've got a lump of soft stuff in each hand and you're doing an awful lot of rubbing forefinger and thumb together ambidextrously, unevenly over the whole mix batch. So again, the confessional that the finished floor is deliberately not perfectly flat to compensate for some of the ridge and front to back, and the 25mm lip made to the sweep of the ancient door, the highest, thinnest, weakest point central under the large dining table, so it should be reasonably protected from wear and tear. A very pale, beautiful cashmere granite dining table that you're not going to want to move. Life will happen around it. But there's other things going on in my head other than sorting out the levels, and while I was on this task I found a solution to the Northern Ireland Protocol too. But who wants to listen to my peace on earth and goodwill to all men solutions? Crushed up, Fuller's Earth is supposed to be a thixotropic material that will displace water. It can stop trench excavation sides collapsing, if it needs to be left. I bought a bag, especially of the 10 to 30mm fiberglass reinforcement fibres. I did contemplate chopping up rock wool. It would have been much cheaper, but I don't think the scissors would have lasted very long. The stuff that I bought is slippery between thumb and forefinger. It's not unpleasant. It feels nice in the hand, not the itchy, can't breathe, choking to death stuff that you'd have to wear a COVID mask to work with. Attestations, well, how the French dealt with COVID confinement, derogatory displacement certificates, a profusion of sworn statements for venturing out of your village or any police perceived invisible cordon. The only way for me to keep in touch with the constantly changing world around me was to cycle and brave sitting outside the public Wi-Fi, which makes a person of interest for interrogation, derogation. But you could go to the baker's. The pretty young baker with the fountain outside opposite the local chateau. Standing in the queue outside, only one person at a time inside with her. You had to be a little bit subtle about how long you were facing what direction in a queue when you're perusing the great variety of socio-economic groups that now considered this entertainment. But we're on the other side of the bridge now, the other side of the wide river, shallow with every rounded rock making the white water look like there was a Melusine fairy just hiding behind it laughing at you. It was a short detour along the river to munch that flan tart on the way back from the baker's. It found me a now favoured place I never knew existed. Who hasn't at some time or other grinding nuts? A local lieu de prédilection? Avortement? Favoured by civilised folk everywhere. Endroit préféré, not a Louis privilège. Endroit préféré, not a Louis privilège. Privilégié. I'm still trying on the French. Broyage des noix. That's nuts, not black. As a stated option, if a vote is opposed, you can't just picnic outside your local nut mill. You have to have a plan to tell the police why you're there, however weak. They're not going to forgive you without an excuse. Near, près, proche, nearby, village, valley, church. There is a village ridge church. One in the valley, one on the ridge. There's loads of them. Sur, près, as well, also. On the meadow, aussi. 3 churches in the village. You're allowed to go to church. Broyage, broyage is a song by Desireless. Have you got any nuts that you want grinding? You've not got a brother. The waterfall water wheel turns the millstone. Cascade roue, Orbs fait tourner la mule. La moudre très brun. Bruit. That battery bar's filming from the other side of the river. Broyage. No moulin action for you. Not Moulin Rouge, but Moulin Nuts Grinding. Or are they the same thing? 200 years ago. But a moulin, a mill, is an amazing thing if you get the chance to do a bit of cultural stuff like that in the summer when you're cycling roads and mountains and swimming and in your camping car and tents and going to spas. Might be closed in the winter when you're skiing or snowboarding or going to spas and music DJs. Autumn, spring is when we, the locals, have the freedom and the sunshine all to ourselves. A period of sanity, but a period of chômage for many. Because of seasonal work, chômage is the unemployment benefit in France. My panic COVID bought provisions included mainly canned tuna, canned spinach and green beans. Was what I was going to be rationing to myself until the end of the world, with some accompanied canned confit duck, which could be rolled out if that passing jogger ever dawdled slowly enough for me to reel her in with my painful attempts at clunky French. Yes, dawdle in some parts of Britain. Move aimlessly or lackadaisically. To dawdle. But the French jogger was no more fond of la bonheur than alpine cyclists, flaneur free, void of massardeur, a trainer. She had a discernible lack of lackadaisical manque de rigueur, just a reading of endorphin-enhanced eyes, meeting and searching was all we ever amounted to. But the word a day that I commit to remembering in French can be so random and whimsical. I mean, to take from COVID, la bonheur, flaneur, moussardeur, manque de rigueur. When am I really going to use those to entertain anyone? So, one trowel broken on my highly polished floor, I turned to higher things. 6 metres by 9 metres, my 55 metres squared. I underslung a 6 metre beam end along the 9 metre length, mid-span, 2 mezzanine 6 metre crossbeams hung tight strapped, double cross looped, with extra long wall plate straps, bearing on the one wall but underslung supported on 2 crossbeams, at about 2 or 3 metre spacing away from their bearing wall. I've maintained the obligatory 2.1 metre RICS, Royal Society of Structural Chartered Surveyors, headroom above, below and double height space to the pitch. So there's 3 metres of double height space behind the photographer of the snub end beam picture that you can see, and then another 3 metres of double height space under the pitch of the eaves on up to the ridge, and then in line with the ridge there's a 3 metre wide mezzanine floor that you've got a 2.1 metre head height at each beam, so a 3 by 9 metre mezzanine. and you can get up to it by a bit of a stoop at the There's a fair few gaps in the big, thick, wide floorboards that I'm hoping these are going to manage to step off, graze his leg up to the thigh, falling through. Error. It was because of screws give you a second chance over nails. It was a retrievable error, but dull moment all the same. I have used the top rung of a ladder before as a structural temporary support. But as an extra pair of hands, the trimmers around the stair needed similar. So intent was I on measured accuracy, fixing all screws up snug, bracket to bearing, and didn't twig. The trimmer was on a mid-rung, and the ladder cannot be removed from the stair void. The fixed beams have trapped the ladder in place, threaded through the rungs. There are many things that get utilised as an extra pair of hands, one more intent than others on becoming more permanent appendages to the building. Have I been on too much of a good thing again, you may be thinking? Have I had too much red wine with my lunch meal? But that just wasn't the case. I had no such excuse. So, time to stretch my legs, go for a ride on the bike and have a picnic, a barbecue down by the river. My bit of glamping-like preparation all amounted to nothing when the aubergine and the steaks, precariously balanced, plummeted to the soil. I'm not kidding anyone that it landed clean on the other grill. I had to wash the ash off so that it wasn't completely wasted trip. And it's cooking sauce burning prop supports for the grill that it's going to be cooking on, falling out and making new fires alongside that I then have to stamp. So a beautiful sunny day. Attenuation. Water attenuation. Water attenuation is where you try and slow everything down so everything doesn't come out down river. There's a great flood when you get a thaw, though it is usually an underground tank or oversized pipes. Because I couldn't get past the neighbour's power play car to get to my own front door. But I went along anyway, and they weren't, sort of French hypocrisy basically, they weren't too strict about anything. I couldn't help but want to buy some bargain 8-inch wide floorboards. These are about the only thing that's not recycled in my project. strictly speaking, not laid in the French diamond diagonal fashion. The boards are 2.4 metres long by the 8-inch width, and they're 2.4 metre diagonals. Whole boards, as they came, have just lopped off the tongue and groove ends 8 inches off so that they can lap, which saves waste and saves doing all those mitres, and does on the 4 or 5 diagonals down the 6 metres by 9 metres room make it look a lot bigger, as postulated reputedly in chateaux up and down the land. Pays. I did some other reuse and repurpose. Courchevel Déchetterie, 100-year-old municipal streetlight lanterns with the OG profile hip top, and with some stainless steel from Val Thorens tip, Déchetterie, from commercial kitchen microwave housings. I was able to shape that dome after taking a template of the rusty tip with paper to find the profile, and make myself a feature letterbox, postbox. It's not to regulation dimensions, and French post offices need those regulation dimensions. But one day a week, the post office was open so I could put in the paperwork. And a bit of French hypocrisy helped me out, and I received my first post at my own place. Yes, and some junk mail. The rust of the dome wasn't over thick enough, sadly, for its lifespan, so the stainless rust contrast design had to be forsaken for using it only for the template form. I was really rather keen on the rust stainless steel contrast because the local hydroelectric power station has had a lot of money spent on it to make it a design item. There's over thick rusty panels that have been used as cladding. Someone's calculated that it should rust at so many millimetres per year and that these cladding panels will last hundreds of years. But it looks like beautiful contextual rock face and fits really quite well into the side of the mountain for a big ugly lump of a building. But the fences and the handrails are similar rusticality to them, but beautifully manufactured. This is architecture for a utilitarian building. It doesn't really happen in Britain. You're not supposed to go there and see it, it's private property. The only people that are going to be brushing up to and ruining their clothes are employees of the company, and they're not going to be complaining. They'll be ruining their job for life. But my postbox application registration got denied and sent back to me. So I was back to Brico buying a photo receipt and then return approved. The post person liked my art form postbox, so they continued to use it. On paperwork, I had a regulation-sized shop-bought postbox. Thank goodness for reasonable returns policies. The office was happy. However, numbers are the main problem. The main aim? Inconsequential. Actually, numbers are distributed spirally, telescopically, with time around the town hall by the mairie. The word for mayor and wife are very similar. So you may have a neighbour on one side and a neighbour on the other, and their postbox number, their number of their house, could be number 18, number 312, or number 1612. The post office don't inform you of your number when you make your application. You have to visit the mairie and find out for yourself. The mairie is closed. You can't get a mobile telephone contract with Orange, without this post box number, and it being registered. So very few in France have little more than a burner-type SIM card, as standard. Retraites. Before Brexit, there was Savoy out of France, a little regionalist movement that never really amounted to anything more than the Gilets jaunes did. More seriously, for me personally, with the ending of a job because of COVID, my healthcare was cancelled. With Brexit, my status and my unemployment healthcare was cancelled. This is before COVID labs made immunisation jabs available or offices were open. I'm doing all my DIY construction work in a very transient status. Online residency card applications were promised, but it wasn't until, well after COVID jabs became available that materialised. But I kept making my expeditions to see the latest, to the local library Wi-Fi and back, just as borders had been closing for the tourists towards the end of the ski season, and us heroic chauffeur drivers were smuggling them into Switzerland, Geneva Airport. The British-French Channel border was sort of tacitly closing if you didn't have the right paperwork. That was the main thing, but I could sort of rationalise, and I was vaccination bound back to Britain before repatriation needs and quarantine really closed in on me. My beautiful yellow Rolls Royce of a vehicle that had had its previous life as a German post van. Some months later, after being jabbed, somewhere in the second jab, which didn't materialise in France until after I'd returned, to be fingerprinted for the residency card, I was able to do it online eventually, at the guichet, at the bureau, in the prefecture, Chambéry prefecture, in the chateau, where Vichy kept detainees. Because of Brexit, though, my application was expedited, pretty much. It was speeded up and made easier so France could have good statistics. Everyone's leaving Britain because of Brexit. I think they'd have put a lot more hurdles in the way, if not driven by central government. The yellow Rolls Royce, many colourful lives of a second-hand car, a Phantom 2, sold by an aristocrat after his French wife is at it in the back with the chauffeur, sold to a place in Genoa-based Maharaja. After a San Remo casino, the yellow Rolls Royce passes to a gangster whose wife has a dalliance with a street photographer. Then her chaperone takes her on a Italy tour to Trieste, to Yugoslavia in 1941, in the need of repair and renovation, a bargain for an American widower, helping partisan resistance. Then a rarity imported into the United States of America, eventually for a bronze pimp lifestyle, an ostentatious classic car for cruising around Harlem, New York. Which brings me to radio stations, local radio stations in France.
Thank you for the tango.
I should warn you that I tend to drive long distances and work with no radio. But crafting things is supposed to be very good for your mental health. With such a big project, I must be very bon santé.
You're so kind. You must
By means of charity rather than the government showing their appreciation.
I'm a woman who needs a man.
But all the multitude offspring of the spawning spider wasn't enough to deter a nest of guepes within, and extending a void in the lime mortar of the 2-foot solid stone walls over a lintel. Wasps were undermining the structural integrity of my grange, a big but hidden nest of them. When the paid holiday is factored in, guepes, I would say, are more unpopular than the COVID virus. The nest of wasps doesn't get you the right to stay at home for months and get paid. But solving COVID is a bit more difficult. It just requires a change or a bending of the safety laws and protocols. The nest of wasps in a cavity in the wall of its own making only really needed squirty, expanding foam to fix the wasps and their void in one fell swoop. But how to appeal to the Abiel, their cuddly country cousins, the bee, how to appeal to the bee and entice them. My trade and craft skills have been hugely useful in getting me through 7 years of university. I'm an architect, technical based, as well as front-end design work, but really specialise in the maître d'œuvre end of things rather than the pretty concept pictures. Design technology teaching projects need a stages of making sheet, a bit like assembly instructions that you might get with a product that you buy, if all abilities of learners are able to fully participate. Tired driving and thankful. I'd done this drive recently in the Mini rather than the van, but the other half was never going to be sleeping in a Mini for the night ever again, and I was aiming for 2 nights, but more than 1 night in the van, in the hammocks, wasn't going to happen either. So doing this drive in one slog. Now I've got 3,000 square foot to try and find materials for, and no creature comforts at all. But I am thankful to be able to get that place in the sun, near a ski resort, for the price that I got it. And decent sized towns and cities nearby, and the prospect of work. Seasonal or minimum wage, but it's not an hour from the beach like I was hoping, but 3 hours isn't so bad. I have a home and an away to be thankful for. A landing in this new country, this new adventure, this new prospect.
Ils parlent tous comme des animaux, de toutes les chattes, ça parle mal. 2018, je sais pas ce qu'il te faut, mais je suis plus qu'un animal. J'ai vu que le rap est à la mode et qu'il marche mieux quand il est sale. Bah faudrait peut-être casser les codes, une fille qui l'ouvre, ce serait normal.
By proxy.
J'ai perdu mon vieux défaut de trouver bizarre